We're claiming your office for your brother, Dad said. I stayed quiet and took action. Start with a slightly hushed, intense tone, then build. Can you imagine pouring 3 years of your life, countless late nights, every ounce of your effort, into building something from nothing, only to have it all casually erased for someone with just 40 followers? For 40 followers on a streaming platform? What would you do if your own family handed down that sentence like it was just the weather? That's exactly what happened to me.
My dad said it.
So calmly, so casually, like it was irreversible. We're taking back your office space. Your brother needs it to stream.
40.
That was the number. 40 followers. And it was enough to wipe out 3 years of my work, my contracts, my nights spent staring at code while the rest of the house slept. I just nodded. I even managed to smile. Sure, I said. I'll clear it out tomorrow. But what I didn't say, what no one saw, was that something in me died right there at that dinner table. And something else, something quietly terrifying, began. I'm Claire. I'm 26 years old. And for as long as I can remember, I fix things. Not just computers, everything. If the Wi-Fi drops, I'm the one who resets it. Printer jams? I'm crawling under the desk. If the car makes a noise you can't quite describe, I'm the one Googling until 2 a.m. to figure it out. I'm the daughter who doesn't panic. The one who handles it. The one my parents brag about to their friends, usually right before they ask for another little favor. This office they were taking wasn't some fancy setup. It was the converted spare room at the back of the house, just off the garage. No real door, no lock, just a cheap folding table and a good chair I'd saved forever for. But that room? That small, unofficial space? That was the only place in that entire house where I existed without being needed. Every invoice I sent, every late-night bug fix, every client call whispered into a headset so I wouldn't wake anyone. It all happened there. That room paid for the electricity they used to watch the streaming shows my brother recommended. It paid for the groceries my mom bought in bulk. It even paid for the insurance on the car my dad still hadn't paid me back for fixing. But at dinner, none of that mattered. My brother, Ryan, didn't even look up from his phone when Dad dropped the bombshell. He just smirked into his soda, probably already picturing his ring light in my spot, his folding gaming chair exactly where my filing cabinet stood. Mom just nodded along, pushing peas around her plate. He's got momentum, she said, like that explained everything. Momentum. 40 followers and a dream. I remember pausing, my fork halfway to my mouth. The room went so quiet. The hum of the fridge suddenly sounded louder than anything else. I waited for the feeling I always expected in moments like this. Anger, heat, something sharp. It didn't come. Instead, there was just this soft collapse inside my chest, like a shelf giving way under too much weight. Okay, I heard myself say, my voice impossibly even. I'll clear it tomorrow. They all relaxed instantly. That's the thing about being the reliable one, you know? People trust you to absorb disappointment without leaking. Ryan finally glanced up. Thanks, sis, he mumbled, already distracted again. This is gonna be huge. Dad just smiled at me, not grateful, just relieved, like a difficult problem had simply solved itself. They thought I'd argue. They thought I'd push back. They thought wrong. That night, after the dishes were done, by me, automatically, of course, I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't even turn on the light. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a client asking if I could take on an extra project. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I just stared into the dark, listening to my brother's laugh through the wall, talking into his headset, already claiming space that hadn't officially been given yet. It wasn't just the room. I knew that. The room was just the latest receipt. This pattern had a history. When I was 16, I saved for months to buy my first laptop. Babysitting weekend shifts, skipping lunches. Ryan got a brand new phone that same year because, as Mom put it, kids need those now. In college, I worked 2 campus jobs while Ryan dropped out of community college twice. My parents blamed the professors, the schedule, the pressure. Never Ryan. Last winter, when the furnace died, I paid for the repair visit, $2,000. Dad called me a lifesaver, said he'd get me back when things eased up. They never did. When Mom's car stalled on the freeway, I left work early to fix it myself. She hugged me, sent me home with leftovers. I told myself it was family. I told myself this was just how roles worked. But sitting there in the dark, a quietly terrifying realization dawned on me. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being used. With affection, sure, but used all the same. I picked up my phone. I opened a tab I'd never seriously considered before: military recruitment. I didn't grow up dreaming of uniforms or salutes. I wasn't chasing heroism. What caught me was something far more basic: structure, boundaries, a system where effort had weight and space was earned, not taken. I filled out the form slowly. Name, age, education, skills. I hesitated at the last question. Why are you interested in serving? I typed, I'm looking for a place where responsibility is shared. I hit submit before doubt could talk me out of it. The next morning, I woke early and started packing my office. Quietly, methodically, unplugging cables, labeling boxes, stacking folders. Ryan wandered in halfway through, eyeing the room like a landlord inspecting a vacancy. You're really doing it, he said, sounding impressed. Yeah, I replied.
Cool.
I'll need that outlet for my mic, he added, already moving his things in his head. I just nodded and kept working. By noon, the room was empty. My desk leaned against the garage wall. My monitor sat face down in a box. The space looked smaller already, less like mine, more like something temporary. Dad stepped in and clapped his hands once. Good, he said. This will work. That afternoon, the recruiter called. His voice was calm, practiced. He asked about my goals, my health, my background. He told me about options, training, benefits. I answered honestly. I didn't mention the office or Ryan or the dinner table. That evening, I told my parents I'd scheduled an appointment to talk about enlistment. Mom blinked. The military? Dad frowned. That seems extreme. Ryan laughed. You? Really? I smiled, the same tight smile I'd worn the night before. I've been thinking about it. They exchanged confused, yet oddly unconcerned, glances. They didn't see it as an exit. They saw it as just another thing I'd handle and move past. They had no idea that the door had already opened behind me, and that once you step through something like that, you don't come back the same. At first, the decision didn't feel dramatic. It felt administrative, like clicking confirm on a form you've already read 3 times. I went to work that week as usual, headphones on, code scrolling, pretending nothing fundamental had shifted. But something had. I could feel it in how my shoulders stayed tense even when the house was quiet. In how every request now landed heavier than it used to. Ryan's streaming setup took over that back room immediately. LED lights bled under the door at night. His voice carried down the hall, loud, confident, rehearsed. He talked to his followers like they were a stadium instead of 40 usernames. Dad bragged about him at breakfast. Mom asked me if I could take a look at the audio because it sounded fuzzy. I said I'd check later and didn't. The memories kept lining up, one after another, like receipts sliding onto a counter I'd never cleared. They weren't dramatic scenes. They were small, and that's what made them stick. As a kid, I learned early that being useful meant being safe. If I helped, if I fixed, if I stayed calm, I was praised. Ryan didn't have to be calm. He was allowed to be loud, messy, unfinished. When he broke things, they called it learning. When I broke down, they called it stress and told me to rest after I finished what needed doing. In high school, I bought my own calculator when the schools required model changed mid-year. Ryan complained about his and got a new one the next day. In college, I took night shifts to cover books. Ryan switched majors twice and got sympathy dinners. When I paid the internet bill after Dad forgot again, Mom said, "We don't know what we'd do without you." She meant it as a compliment. But I started noticing how often "without you" came up like a threat disguised as gratitude. The recruiter emailed me details for the appointment. Address, time, what to bring. I printed the list at work because the printer at home was already acting up, and I knew if I fixed it one more time, that would be the expectation again. On the drive home, I rehearsed conversations I wouldn't have. I wasn't planning to announce anything yet. I wanted to see if the house could feel my absence before it actually happened. That night, Mom asked if I could pick up groceries. I looked at the fridge half full. Enough for a few days. Tomorrow, I said. She frowned. We're out of snacks. Ryan likes. I'll go later, I repeated and went to my room. Later came and went. No snacks appeared. Ryan complained. Dad sighed. No one asked me directly. They were waiting for the system to correct itself. It didn't. When the Wi-Fi dropped 2 days later, Ryan stormed down the hall. Claire. It cut out midstream. I was at my desk, answering emails. Routers in the hallway closet. I said without looking up. You're not going to fix it, he stammered. Not right now. He stared at me like I'd switched languages. Dad came in annoyed. Can you help him out? I'm working, I said, and kept typing. The silence that followed was thick, confused. I felt something loosen inside me. Not relief, but recognition. The house ran on my invisible labor. Once I stopped supplying it, automatically, everything sputtered. That weekend, I went through my things, making quiet decisions. What mattered? What didn't? I packed important documents into a folder and slid it into my car trunk. I backed up my hard drives twice. I changed passwords. None of it felt spiteful. It felt careful. At dinner Sunday night, Dad mentioned money. Things are a little tight, he said casually. Might need some help until Ryan's channel takes off. I chewed slowly. I'm budgeting differently right now. Mom looked surprised. Since when? Since now. They exchanged glances again. That shared confusion, mild irritation. They still thought this was a phase, a mood. The appointment at the recruitment office was quiet. Fluorescent lights, neutral walls, paperwork. The sergeant asked me why I was interested. I gave him the same answer. Only clearer now. I want accountability. I want to earn my place. He nodded like he'd heard that before. Maybe he had. When I got home, Ryan had moved my old bookshelf into the garage without asking. My notebooks were stacked unevenly on top, pages bent. Something hot flickered through me. Not rage, exactly, but a boundary being crossed with a smile. That was my shelf, I said. You weren't using it, he shrugged. I needed space for cables. I picked up the notebooks, carrying them to my room slowly, deliberately. Dad watched from the doorway. You're being sensitive, he said. No, I replied. I'm paying attention. That night, I lay awake, listening to Ryan celebrate a new follower like a victory parade. I thought about the forms I'd signed, the training schedule, the months ahead. I thought about how the military didn't care who you were in your family, only what you did, only what you carried yourself. The next morning, Mom knocked on my door. Your father said you're considering leaving? I'm considering serving, I corrected. She sighed. That's a big decision. So is taking someone's space without asking, I said gently. She didn't answer, just nodded and walked away. By the end of the week, the house felt different. Louder. Less efficient. The printer jammed and stayed jammed. The lawn grew uneven. The sink filled up. They noticed the symptoms, not the cause. They asked for fixes, not change. And somewhere in all of it, I felt myself stepping back, one small refusal at a time. Not to punish. Not to teach a lesson. Just to see what would happen if I stopped holding the roof up alone. The real shift didn't happen in an argument. It happened the next morning while I was brushing my teeth. I heard drawers opening in the hallway. Not my drawers. Deeper, heavier ones. The kind that stuck unless you pulled just right. I rinsed my mouth, wiped the sink, and stepped out. Dad was standing in the doorway of what used to be my office, a tape measure in his hand. Ryan was crouched by the wall, threading cables through a power strip like he'd always owned the place. Morning, Dad said, not looking at me, just figuring out spacing. For what? I asked, though I already knew. Ryan's desk, he said. We're selling your old one. Guy's coming this afternoon. The sentence landed flat. No pause, no question, just information. You sold my desk, I repeated. Dad winced, like he'd expected that reaction but hoped it wouldn't come. You weren't using it anymore. And Ryan needs something sturdy. Streaming setups require real equipment. Ryan stood up, stretching. It's cool. You'll get some of it back. I told Dad to give you $100. $100. For the desk I'd assembled myself. For the scratches from late nights. For the surface where I'd signed my first contract. Keep it, I said, my voice sounding distant even to me. Call it an investment. Dad exhaled, relieved. Good. I knew you'd understand. That was the moment something inside me went very quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I walked back to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed, hands resting on my knees, and stared at the wall until the buzzing in my ears faded. Understanding wasn't the right word. Confirmation was. They didn't see my work as work. They saw it as space that could be repurposed, tools that could be redistributed, effort that defaulted to the family pool. I pulled out my phone and booked a small storage unit 15 minutes away. Month to month.
Cheap. Secure.
I scheduled a pickup for the following day. Then I opened my calendar and blocked out the afternoon appointment. I labeled it adulting. That was true enough. When the buyer came for the desk, I stayed in my room. I heard the scrape of wood, the thud against the garage floor, the stranger's voice thanking Dad. Ryan laughed about how much better his setup would look now. I didn't go out.
I didn't say goodbye to the desk.
By evening, the room was unrecognizable. LED lights pulsed where my lamp used to sit. The hum of electronics replaced the quiet I'd built my days around. It felt like watching someone else move into your skin. I started changing my behavior more deliberately after that. Not dramatically, precisely. On Tuesday, I bought only milk and bread. No extras. Mom blinked at the grocery bag. That's it. Budgets are tight, I said, and went upstairs. On Wednesday, the Wi-Fi cut out again. Ryan yelled. Dad knocked on my door. Can you take a look?
Not tonight, I said.
I'm busy. On Thursday, Dad complained about the printer. I suggested he restart it and went for a walk. Every small refusal felt like lifting a finger off a pressure point I'd been holding down for years. At night, I moved my valuables. Not all at once, just enough not to be noticed. Laptop first, then the external drives, then the folder with contracts and tax documents. Each trip to the storage unit made my shoulders drop a little lower. The things that mattered were no longer at risk of being repurposed. The recruiter called again to confirm my next steps. Physical, background check, timeline. I listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. This was real now. Not an idea. A path. I hadn't told my parents the full timeline. I wasn't hiding it to be cruel. I was waiting to see if they'd notice anything beyond inconvenience. They didn't. They noticed the lawn, the groceries, the Wi-Fi. They didn't notice me. Friday afternoon, Dad caught me in the kitchen. You're pulling back, he said, like it was a flaw. I'm adjusting, I replied.
To what?
To reality. He frowned. We're family. We help each other. Yes, I said. We should. That night, Ryan's stream ran late. His laughter echoed down the hall, sharp and triumphant. I lay awake, thinking about the training schedule the recruiter had sent. Early mornings, clear expectations, consequences that applied evenly. The house felt louder than usual. Or maybe I was just listening differently. Saturday morning, I carried the last box to my car. Dad watched from the porch. What's all that? Work stuff, he asked. You're not planning on leaving, are you? I paused. I'm planning on not being taken from anymore. He didn't respond, just turned back inside. The day before my medical screening, Mom knocked softly on my door. Your father's worried, she said. I know. He thinks you're doing this because of Ryan. I met her eyes. I'm doing this because of me. She sat on the bed, smoothing the blanket. We didn't mean to hurt you. I believe that, I said. But intent doesn't erase impact. She nodded slowly, like she was filing the sentence away for later. The morning I left for the screening, the house was quiet. Ryan slept in. Dad read the paper. Mom stood at the sink. No one asked where I was going. No one offered a ride. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the house. The lawn needed mowing. The porch light flickered. The back room glowed faintly, already alive with someone else's ambitions. I wasn't angry. I was clear. And once clarity settles in, It's hard to pretend you don't see what's been happening all along. By the time my enlistment paperwork moved from pending to scheduled, the house had developed a new rhythm. And it wasn't a good one. It was the sound of things not getting done. At first, it came across as irritation. Dad sighing louder than necessary when the printer refused to cooperate. Mom muttering about the grocery bills stretching thinner than usual. Ryan snapping at his screen because the stream lagged, his voice sharp with frustration he didn't know where to put.
They didn't connect those sounds to me.
Not yet. I still lived there, technically. I still slept in the same room, parked in the same driveway, ate at the same table. That was the trick.
From the outside, nothing had changed.
But inside the machinery of the house, something essential had been removed. A gear. A silent one. I stopped anticipating needs. That was the hardest habit to break. For years, I'd learned to see problems before they were spoken. A light flickering meant a bulb needed changing. A strange smell from the garage meant oil. A tense silence from Mom meant bills were due. I'd acted before anyone asked. It made life smoother. It made me indispensable.
Now?
I waited. When the lawn grew uneven, I noticed and did nothing. When the sink backed up, I placed the plunger back under the cabinet and went to my room. When Ryan asked if I could just check something real quick on his setup, I said, I don't have time, and closed my door. The house didn't explode. It just sagged. At night, I could hear Dad pacing. Hear Mom on the phone with her sister, her voice tight with stress. Hear Ryan complaining about algorithms and unfair odds, about how no one understood how hard this was. I understood exactly how hard it was. I just stopped cushioning the fall. Meanwhile, my own life was becoming strangely ordered. I started running in the mornings, following a basic training guide I'd found online. The air was cool, quiet. No one asked anything of me at 6 a.m. My legs burned. My lungs protested. But the pain felt earned.
Honest.
I organized my finances one evening, sitting on the bed with my laptop and a notebook. Income, expenses, savings. I'd been supporting more than I'd admitted even to myself. Subscriptions in my name, utilities partially covered by my account, little transfers labeled temporary. I canceled what I could. Set end dates on the rest. The first notice came 3 days later. Why is the internet warning us about disconnection? Mom asked, holding her phone out to me like evidence. I changed the billing, I said. It ends Monday. Her eyes widened. But Ryan needs it. Ryan can pay for it, I replied. She stared at me like I'd just suggested something immoral. That night, Dad knocked on my door. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. This pulling back, it's making things harder. I met his gaze. Things were easier because I made them easy. That's what family does, he said. I nodded. Family also notices when one person carries everything.
He didn't argue.
He just stood there, jaw tight, like someone who'd realized too late that a bridge was already burning behind him. The day before I was scheduled to leave for initial training orientation, I packed a duffel bag. Just essentials. Clothes folded tight, running shoes, documents. I left it by the door, unobtrusive. Ryan noticed it first. You going somewhere? He asked mid-scroll. Yes. When? Tomorrow. His eyebrows lifted. For how long? I considered the answer. Long enough. Dad came in later, eyes drawn immediately to the bag. What's this? My things, I said. You didn't say you were leaving. I said I was adjusting. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. This isn't like you, he finally said. I almost laughed. This was exactly like me. They just hadn't been paying attention. That night, the house felt restless. Doors opened and closed. Ryan's stream cut out twice. He shouted. Mom snapped back. Dad raised his voice for the first time in weeks. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the cracks spread. In the early morning, before anyone else was up, I loaded the duffel into my car. The sky was just starting to lighten, that soft gray blue that feels like a pause before the day decides what it will be. Mom appeared in the doorway, robe pulled tight. Be careful, she said. I will. She hesitated. Call us. I'll let you know I'm safe, I said. It wasn't a promise of more than that. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. A message from a recruiter. Welcome. Today's the first step. I didn't look back this time. The training facility was loud, controlled, impersonal. Names replaced by numbers. Instructions given once. Expectations clear. I felt out of place and oddly relieved. No one assumed I'd clean up after them. No one borrowed my effort without permission. That night, exhausted, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom. 1 text from Dad. The hot water heater isn't working. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The old reflex surged, solutions lining up tools. Imagine steps ready. Then I set the phone down. Not because I didn't care, but because this was the moment everything hinged on. If I rushed back now, nothing would change. And for the first time in my life, I was willing to let the system feel what it was like without me holding it together. The call came 2 days later, just after lights out. Phones weren't supposed to be on, but everyone had them anyway, tucked under pillows, hidden in lockers, glowing softly in the dark like guilty secrets. Mine buzzed once, stopped, then buzzed again. I recognized the pattern before I saw the name. Dad. I rolled onto my side and stared at the ceiling for a full breath before answering. Hey, I said quietly, careful not to wake the woman in the bunk next to me. His voice came through tight, stripped of its usual authority. We need you. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not. How are you? Not. Are you okay? Just need. What's going on? I asked. The hot water heater's dead, he said. No hot water since yesterday morning. Your mother's been boiling water on the stove just to wash dishes. I tried resetting it, but it's making this noise. We don't have the money for a service call right now. I pictured the basement, the narrow stairs, the unit I'd researched, repaired, maintained. I knew that heater better than anyone else in that house. I can look up the manual, I said. There was a pause. You could just come home and take a look, he said carefully. It would be faster. I sat up slowly, my feet touching the cold floor. I'm not coming home. Silence. I didn't mean right now, he said. Claire, it's cold. I know, I said. What's the error code? He exhaled, annoyed. Hold on. I heard shuffling, the sound of him walking downstairs. Then, quieter. It says E03. I pulled my phone closer and opened the manufacturer's site. The page loaded slowly. My fingers knew exactly where to go. It's the igniter, I said after a moment. Common issue. The part's about $90. Labor will cost more if you call someone. Another pause. Can you fix it? I looked around the room. Rows of bunks, identical blankets, the faint hum of the building settling for the night. I thought about the duffel bag by my locker. My name stitched on it. My paycheck already accounted for. My life finally in one place. Yes, I said. But there are conditions. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was cautious. Conditions? I'll fix it once, I said. After that, we sit down, all of us. We open the numbers. Real numbers. Budget bills, who pays what. And Ryan starts contributing. He doesn't have income yet, Dad said quickly. That's not my problem, I replied. He gets a job within 4 weeks.
Any job.
He pays rent, something symbolic if you want. He takes over basic chores, lawn, trash, repairs. And no one touches my things again. Ever. You're asking for a lot, he said. I almost laughed. I've been giving a lot for years. The line was quiet long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, he said, Fine. I drove back that weekend. The house felt smaller when I walked in. Colder. The heater clanked angrily in the basement. Mom hovered in the kitchen, tired, lines deeper than I remembered. Ryan sat at the table, scrolling, his streaming setup dark for once. I didn't hug anyone. I didn't scold. I went straight to work. The igniter was cracked just like I thought. I replaced it, tested the system, waited until the heat kicked back on. The house filled with warmth slowly, almost grudgingly. When Mom started thanking me, I held up a hand. Kitchen table, I said. Bills. Dad swallowed.
Now. Yes. Now.
We spread everything out. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, streaming subscriptions, phone plans, repair costs. I added my bank statements last, highlighted the transfers, the amounts, the dates. This, I said, tapping the paper, is what it actually costs to live here. Ryan rolled his eyes. This is dramatic. This is math, I replied. I turned to him. You pay $250 a month. You get a job within 4 weeks.
Any job.
You mow the lawn. You learn basic repairs with Dad. That's not fair, he snapped. I'm trying to build something. So was I said, and I still paid my share. He looked to Dad, waiting for the rescue. It didn't come. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. Your sister's right, he said finally. Things have to change. Ryan stared at him like he'd been betrayed. I stacked the papers neatly. I'm not cutting off love, I said. I'm cutting off unlimited access. No one argued after that. The first week back at training, my phone stayed mostly silent. That alone told me everything. No frantic messages, no missed calls stacking up, no, just one quick question. The house had adjusted, awkwardly, imperfectly, but it hadn't collapsed. That realization carried a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief that I hadn't imagined my own importance. Grief that it had taken my absence for them to notice it. By day 10, the routine had settled into my bones. Wake before dawn. Beds made tight enough to bounce a coin. Boots lined up, laces tucked. Every movement had a reason. Every correction came with clarity. No one apologized for standards. They just enforced them. I thrived in it, more than I expected. At night, when the lights went out, I lay awake listening to the building breathe, hundreds of people, adjusting to the same discipline, the same expectations. No one asked me to fix their life. No one assumed I would. For the first time, I wasn't infrastructure. I was just another person carrying my own weight. On day 12, Mom texted, "Your father says thank you again for the heater. It's working fine." I read it twice. No request followed, no hint, just information. I replied with a thumbs up and put the phone away. The next message came 3 days later from Ryan. Dad says I need to start paying rent next month. I smiled despite myself. That's what we agreed. I typed back. A pause. Then, I got an interview at the warehouse. Not streaming, but whatever. Whatever pays the bills, I replied. There was no instant response. I imagined him sitting on his bed, phone in hand, processing the unfamiliar sensation of consequence. It wasn't punishment. It was adulthood arriving without asking permission. A week later, Dad called. Middle of the afternoon this time. I stepped away from the common area and answered.
Hey, he said.
His voice sounded older. Not weaker, just more careful. I wanted to let you know we set up a budget. That's good, I said. We cut some things, he continued. Streaming services, upgraded phone plans, stuff we didn't really need. I leaned against the wall, listening. And Ryan's been mowing the lawn, he added, almost like he was testing the words. Not well, but he's doing it. I let out a small breath. Good. There was a beat. You're doing well there? Yes, I said. Honestly, I am. Another pause, then quieter. We should have done this sooner. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't say, we were wrong. But it was the closest he'd ever come. 6 weeks passed. The first paycheck hit my account on a Tuesday morning. I stared at the numbers longer than I needed to. Not because of the amount, but because of what it represented. My work, my effort, my name attached to something earned without negotiation. I paid my bills. I moved a portion into savings. I bought myself a pair of running shoes that didn't hurt my feet. Small, deliberate choices. Each one felt like placing a brick in a foundation that was finally mine. Near the end of training, Dad called again. The furnace is acting up, he said, cautious now. I'm not asking you to come. I just wondered if you knew what the noise might mean. I pictured the control panel, the manual, the diagram etched into my memory. What does it sound like? I asked. He described it slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to fail a test. It's probably the blower motor, I said. You can check the filter first. There's a video online. You're not going to walk me through it? He asked, not accusing, just curious. I can, I said, but you should try first. He hesitated then. Okay. When the call ended, I didn't feel guilty. I felt proud of him.
Of me.
I visited home 3 months later. The house looked steadier. The lawn was trimmed. The porch light worked. The kitchen sink was empty. When I stepped inside, Mom hugged me tightly, then pulled back to look at my face like she was seeing it for the first time. You look different, she said. I feel different, I replied. Dad stood nearby, hands in his pockets. He cleared his throat and handed me an envelope. Inside were 5 crisp $100 bills. It's a start, he said. We'll keep paying you back every month. I nodded. Thank you. Ryan hovered awkwardly, then stepped forward.
I got promoted, he said.
Shift lead. That's good, I said. He shrugged, embarrassed. It's more work. Welcome to adulthood, I replied, without venom. During dessert, the dishwasher made a low groaning sound mid-cycle. Everyone froze. Old reflexes flared. All eyes turned to me. I stayed seated. Dad noticed first. He turned to Ryan instead. Can you check that tomorrow? Ryan hesitated, then nodded.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
No one looked at me.
That was the moment I felt it loosen. The last tight knot I hadn't realized I was still carrying. We sat in the living room after dinner. Ryan talked about work, not dreams, not followers, but actual shifts, actual supervisors. He complained about early mornings and sore feet. I listened without interrupting. It's harder than it looks, he admitted quietly. I know, I said. He glanced at me, surprised by the lack of judgment, then nodded. Before I left, Mom hugged me again. Longer this time. I didn't realize how much you were holding, she said into my shoulder. I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Driving back to base that night, I thought about how close I'd come to staying, to shrinking, to turning myself into something smaller, just to keep the peace. I thought about how easy it would have been to keep fixing, keep paying, keep absorbing. Leaving didn't end my family. It ended their habit of living on my back. I still love them. I still show up. But I show up as a daughter, not as infrastructure. I don't lend money. I don't solve every problem. I don't rush in when something breaks. I let them try. I let them learn. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do isn't to stay and suffer quietly. Sometimes it's to walk away so everyone else has to finally stand up. 6 months after I left, the house stopped feeling like a place I had escaped from. It became a place I visited. That distinction mattered more than I expected. I drove in on a Saturday afternoon, the sun low enough to cast long shadows across the driveway. The porch light wasn't flickering anymore. The lawn was evenly cut, edges a little uneven, sure, but intentional. Someone had tried. When Mom opened the door, her face softened in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not relief, not expectation, just recognition. You're here, she said. I am. She stepped aside without asking how long I'd stay. The kitchen smelled like dinner, not urgency. No stacked dishes. No half-finished repairs waiting for my attention like unpaid debts. Dad stood by the counter, slicing bread. He looked up, smiled, and went back to what he was doing. No immediate request, no problem presented. Ryan came down the stairs a minute later, hair still damp from a shower, wearing a work shirt with a warehouse logo stitched on the chest. He paused when he saw me, then nodded.
Hey, he said.
Hey. That was it. No jokes, no defensiveness, just 2 adults acknowledging each other's presence. We ate together like a normal family. Talked about neutral things. Weather, work schedules, a neighbor's new dog. I noticed what wasn't said. No one mentioned money. No one hinted at repairs. No one asked me to take a look at anything. After dinner, Dad cleared his throat and reached into his wallet. He slid an envelope across the table toward me. Inside were 5 crisp bills, carefully folded. Same amount as last month, he said. Automatic transfers set up now. You won't have to remind us. I met his eyes. He didn't look away.
Thank you, I said.
He nodded once, not proud, not ashamed, just steady. Later, when the dishwasher hummed a little louder than usual, Mom glanced at it, then back at her plate. Dad followed her gaze, then turned not to me, but to Ryan. Can you check that tomorrow? He asked. Ryan sighed lightly. Yeah, I'll look it up.
No one looked at me.
That was the moment I felt it loosen, the last tight knot I hadn't realized I was still carrying. We sat in the living room after dinner. Ryan talked about work. Not dreams, not followers, but actual shifts, actual supervisors. He complained about early mornings and sore feet. I listened without interrupting. It's harder than it looks, he admitted quietly. I know, I said. He glanced at me, surprised by the lack of judgment, then nodded. Before I left, Mom hugged me again. Longer this time. I didn't realize how much you were holding, she said into my shoulder. I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Driving back to base that night, I thought about how close I'd come to staying. To shrinking. To turning myself into something smaller, just to keep the peace. I thought about how easy it would have been to keep fixing, keep paying, keep absorbing. Leaving didn't end my family. It ended their habit of living on my back. I still love them. I still show up. But I show up as a daughter, not as infrastructure. I don't lend money. I don't solve every problem. I don't rush in when something breaks. I let them try. I let them learn. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do isn't to stay and suffer quietly. Sometimes it's to walk away so everyone else has to finally stand up. So, if this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the reliable one, the fixer, the person everyone leaned on without really asking, tell me, what part of this felt familiar? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with the people you love? I truly want to know your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you don't want to miss the next story about boundaries, accountability, and finding your way back to yourself, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep going together.